Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. You see Mr. Kang on my T-shirt with all the broken timelines around his head. I love this. I love this shirt. New Rockstars. Your nerd riot website is. I love the stuff you guys put up. But I'm here to talk about a little movie that features this guy. We got some spoilers to talk about. We talked about some good things, but I know that there are some people who don't like this movie too much. And I said you couldn't talk over on my other video. But here's your forum. There are things that you don't like about this movie. Well, gear up, baby, because this is the spot where you can talk about some things. And if you're trying to understand why people have issues with this movie, this could be a video for you, because hopefully you'll understand where I'm coming from, because I really do like this movie. But there's some stuff I was like, why did we do that? What am I talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We are getting ready to dive into my 5 least favorite things about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. And the title is not one of them. It's been a little bit of a tongue twister this time around. But look, we just talked about my 5 favorite things. You want to see that video right there, you can check it out. It's one of these things where I understand people who love this movie, because there's some really, really good stuff in there. And honestly, like, it's a better movie than what critics and some people are saying about it. However, the people who are upset with the movie, have issues with the movie, don't like the movie, guess what? I'm a pretty positive guy. Overall, I like the movie, but I see where you're coming from, man, because this is not a perfect movie. It's actually far from a perfect movie. And the things that are wrong with the movie really undercut it in a way that sets it up to be, like, debated if it's good or bad. And that in and of itself is a problem. And it's a problem that Marvel needs to look at and try to correct, because you get a movie like this, one of the things that I don't have listed here because it's not directly in the movie, but like the marketing around this movie, the way you talk about these characters. You're talking to a comic book audience that understands things, but your non-comic book audience, they just hear, yo, this new guy that they're introducing in this movie that's going to be like the villain for like the Avengers movies is supposed to make Thanos look like a chump. And then you see that guy get taken out by an army of ants. And you're just kind of like, wait, this guy would eat Thanos for a snack? Where, like, your marketing and the way you build things up, we're not in phase 3. We're not doing, like, everybody, one of the things that needs to stop is people trying to compare these movies to the big ones, right? Like, the quality should always be there. But, like, trying to look at these movies like, man, look at what you did. This is so not that. But it's that marketing, right? You're building these things to be these huge, interconnected, multiversal elements of the storytelling. Same thing happened with Multiverse of Madness. That movie was being propped up like it was going to be No Way Home. And it was a very small movie. This was a movie that I think lives up mostly to the expectations outside of, like, doing something like undercutting Kang. And that is where we're going to start, man, because it's my least favorite thing in this entire movie. It's something that I had heard. I watch, other comic book fans review movies and things, and I like to hear what they say, because as a comic book fan, I think you have a different viewpoint on this material. And a lot of them said that they had issues with the narrative specifically around Kang, and specifically, it's that ant moment. It's something that just really undercuts him as the villain in the movie. Up until that point, like, I was watching the film going, I don't understand what people are saying. Like, yeah, he's not, like, flat out terrifying, and he's not, like, murdering tons of people or doing anything, like, too crazy, but, like, I think Major's in the character doing what I would expect the character to do. Until you get to the third act, when shit starts to go down, I don't like the Darth Vader-ish approach that Jeff Loveness takes with Kang. He's sitting up there as his engine is kicking up, and I love the idea that he's built this crazy army and that he's gonna take all of that with him. But, like, while like he needs his mindless minions, like, that's not the way that I would necessarily think he would need to conquer. Like, Kang likes to do a lot of things on his own, but nevertheless, like, that whole thing, like, the setup, I'm like, yo, man, this stuff is cool. But then the minute the rebels show up, I don't think Kang just sits up there and goes, go stop them, you go do things. Like, I think he goes right down there and does what he does a little bit later when everything starts to break, right? Which is like, I'm pissed now, I'm gonna handle this myself. You see the power, but the lack to jump on it. Like, this is a guy who is like, it's not this isn't like early days Kang the Conqueror. Now, I think there's one thing that you could have done that would have fixed all of this, and credit to Coy Jandreau, because he's the one that said this. If you would have just had the council at the end of the movie go, we banish the weakest conqueror, But half these issues that I'm about to talk about kind of become negated. But this movie has built everything in the build up to the movie has been like he's the conqueror. The movie builds him up as the conqueror. Like this is Kang the Conqueror. I'm pretty sure that he's not dead. He got sent somewhere else, and this guy is going to come back, and he's gonna be really pissed off. And you're gonna see him fight other Kangs, and like he's gonna become the threat that you're like, oh shit, I was wrong about that guy. And it's the fact that like he's not early days Kang. Like this is a guy who's already conquered lots of places. Just look at his technology and the things that he does. He's traveled time. He's been Ramatut. Like he's done all these things. That guy doesn't sit back and go, oh man, they've ruined my plan. I better go down there and fix it. Like I think he would have gone to action right away. And I think that you could have done that, like you didn't need to sit. You could have still had all the things pretty much play out the way they do, but have him act first. Like it's one of those where he can't be everywhere all at once. So if he's being distracted by trying to stop a bat, like you could still do the things that Ant-Man and the Wasp are able to accomplish. But it undercuts him to kind of just have him sit there and be very Darth Vader-ish. And there's a lot of Star Wars vibes in this movie. So like if that's what you were going for, I could sort of understand the thought process, but like not with this character. Then the other thing that really undercuts him, and I think is the thing that kind of makes him almost jokeable, is the way the ants come in and just kind of save the day at the end of the movie. Now, granted, he comes back. You can see that he clearly, obviously fought his way through however many ants were taking him away. But just the way it happens just seems to undercut all of that. Like, you show this unbelievable power, and then, like, it's an army of intelligent ants that take you out. And that's one of the things where, like, had you built the ants up a little bit, maybe if you would have, I mean, we'll talk about this and how I would have changed the movie, but, like, one of the things I would have liked is if it would have just been Hank and Janet, have them go on an Ant-Man and Wasp OG adventure and find the ants. Give us a little more than, like, just a bit of, like, dialogue that explains a lot of stuff. Show us some of the stuff with the ants so that when they show up, all right, when that stuff happens, they could be a distraction. Like, they are, technically, but it doesn't feel like it you got to build it in a little bit more of a way where it's like, oh man, these ants are really formidable. Like, I understand how Kang could get taken away, and I also understand how hard he would have had to fight to get to where he gets to. And it's just like things like that in the third act, I just think undercut the character in general if you know about the character as a comic book reader, but it even undercuts the stuff that you're building in your marketing, your lead-ups to this movie, and then what you actually get from Majors. Like, he is menacing, he is terrifying, and when he finally starts to go off, you're like, dude. I mean, the finale sequence is perfect. I'm scared of that guy. He is physically imposing without any technology, and then, yeah, a little bit of luck can send him off somewhere, but next time you see him, it's not going to be fun. And I'm sure that the movie, or, we're going to see him in Loki, obviously. But, like, I'm sure the next places that he shows up, he is a little bit more terrifying. He does have a little bit of a different approach. But the writing around Kang is really, specifically in the third act, the thing that, for me, gives this thing a big old Cassie punch-you-in-the-face moment to the movie. Like, replace MODOK with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And one of the biggest blows that it takes is the kind of way that it undercuts Kang in and of the terror that he is already being built up to be without ever being seen on screen. And yes, the end credit sequences certainly show you how scary he is because there's so many different versions of him, and the fact that there is a council of them that kind of all get together, like, yeah, that's dangerous. But if you had this guy feeling like the Conqueror, like, the fact that they banished that guy, like, there's reasons for that. And that was one of the things I don't think the movie handled very well, and I think they should have done a little bit better job around that. Fortunately, Jonathan Majors does all of the things that you need him to do, and then some, to kind of really put you in a spot where the next time you see him, if you're able to course correct, it'll still work because Majors is carrying everything in there. But I didn't like how they undercut Kang a little bit in this movie narratively. The other thing that really I didn't like, and it hit less the second time around because she really is part of the two biggest moments of the movie, but I needed more Wasp, man. Evangeline Lilly is really good in this role, and it's one of these things where, like, I think it's one of these things where I think Hope could be a character that's like a career performance type for her. Like, the character has enough interesting things going on with her, specifically with what's there with her and Scott, where, like, her and Scott, it's been this kind of awkward, interesting, at odds type romance that by this point seems to kind of have solved itself. And the thing that I was really missing in the movie, while yeah, Scott is getting time back with Cassie, sort of, which is another thing, like Kang, I could give you that time back, right? Like I could take you back and drop you off where you get to spend all that time with your little girl. You don't lose those 5 years. Something I would have liked to have seen them play with in the Kang narrative as well. But when you look at like, okay, this, I could see where the story is about like Scott and Cassie. The thing that's missing is Hope. That's the family story that I want. While, yeah, seeing Hope hang out with her mom and dad is fun, that's not like something that you got to work for. That's just something that like you want to get back. And in general, off screen, they've spent plenty of time together. The thing that should be really important to Hope at this point is becoming part of Scott and Cassie's family. And while there are moments that kind of definitely clue you into that when they hug or embrace, where it's like you can see there's a good relationship there, that was the thing in the movie that was really missing for me on the Ant-Man side. And I think if you would have had Evangeline Lilly's Hope riding with Scott and Cassie the whole movie, you'd give her more to do. When Cassie splits off for a little bit, like you could, then it's just Ant-Man and like it's their movie. And yes, like I said, she shows up for the probability storm, and she's a big contributor in the finale piece. But there were just stretches because they were separated where I was like, I don't feel like Evangeline Lilly got anything to really do. Like she was just kind of like a piece of, Hank and Janet's story. Mostly her and Hank both are just kind of hanging along for whatever Janet's story was. And I think you could have really used Hope as a character in building that family with Scott and Cassie in a way that would have given her more screen time, given her more to do from a performance level, and had her more involved where you don't feel like Wasp is missing, right? Like that was my big takeaway the first time. I was like, man, that was great, but I really felt like there wasn't enough Wasp for me. When I go back, yeah, she's in all the major moments, but yeah, I just could have used a little bit more there, and I wish they kind of would have just taken a different direction with Hope to even her up to Scott. Like this should have been a movie about her and Scott becoming the leader, like the two that could be the leaders of the Avengers. And there are things in there, but I just think it could have been handled a little bit better. The third thing that really I don't like and doesn't work for me in this movie is the fact that, again, when you're working with some of these Rick and Morty writers and you start telling a non-linear, traditional third act type story, that stuff can work on TV, and specifically in the type of realm that Rick and Morty is, because you're playing with multiverses and you don't have to, play everything the way that you normally would. But when you get into a movie, right, like you don't have 5 to 10 hours to go through story and build things and do this non-normal structure. In a movie, you got a little over 2 hours to get your audience from point A to point B, where it's always in an upward motion. And this movie suffers from not following a traditional 3-act structure. For me, I never, not even the second time, do I ever get into the momentum build of the third act. Like, these superhero movies should be building and building and building in the first two, so that when the third act hits and everything starts to go, you're just like, yes! And that doesn't happen with this movie. And it's not that there isn't good building, right? Like, I think I like a lot of what's in the first 2 acts and how it sets up things for the third act, which then undercuts itself in certain moments. But, like, the non-linear concept, I think, really does take you out of the movie a few times. Like, we go back for, like, 15, 20 minutes to tell Kang's backstory, and then we follow that with MODOK's backstory, like in a really quick stretch. And now all of the momentum that you've been building going into the third act disappears. You start the movie with showing Kang crash into the quantum realm, and then you just leave him lingering out there without saying his name for an entire hour. Like, Janet dragging her feet to tell everybody who Kang is and why he's dangerous and what's going on. It is something else that just, like, in the first act particularly, where you're just like, can we just, like, we've already seen him. Everybody knows that it's Kang. Can we just get there? And some of that, like I said, non-linear storytelling, I think zaps out. It takes the momentum out of the movie multiple times, where by the time you get into the third act, you feel like you're starting to build yourself again rather than riding the momentum wave, right? Like, think of it like surfing. You got a paddle, right? Or boogie boarding, because I've never actually surfed. But you got to paddle to get up on the wave, and then once you're up on it and you're in the right place, you just ride the wave out. That's how the movie's supposed to work. The first 2 acts are supposed to be the finding the wave, the paddling to the spot, and then when you get to the top, you're just riding that baby all the way to the end. And that momentum feels like you're starting at the beginning when you get into that 3rd act. And that is a big problem for me. And I think it's one of the reasons why I think people aren't connecting with the movie, because it doesn't give you that cheer moment. That, like, whenever I go to a Marvel movie, typically on opening night, people clap at the end of the movie at the very least, but typically multiple times there'll be hoots, hollers, cheers, like yes moments, specifically in these bigger movies that don't happen here. I mean, nobody clapped at the end of Quantumania either time I saw it. And I think it's not because the movie is bad. It's because the momentum isn't there to get you to rise out of your seat. So yeah, I don't think having the traditional 3-act structure not be present here, while it could work in a multiversal Quantumania type story in a 2-hour movie, I think it really hurts it. Then when you go to my 4th least favorite thing, where was Michael Pena, T.I., and Das Malchian? I know Das Malchian's in the movie, and I probably should have included in how much I enjoyed him in the things I really loved about the movie, because Das Malchian and finding a place for him was great. But those 3 guys are the thing that, like, people who are saying this doesn't feel like an Ant-Man movie, those are the guys that could have made this feel like an Ant-Man movie. I would have either used them at the beginning or the end, or maybe in both spots with Scott, right? Like when he's doing the book reading, maybe you have the guys there. They're setting everything up for Scott as he's walking down the street. Maybe you just start the movie off with, instead of hearing Scott's inner monologue at all in the movie, maybe it's just Michael Pena telling you what's going on with Scott as we get into the movie. Like, I just felt like there was a place for Luis and those guys to pop in just quick when we're on Earth to tie this thing into the world, right? Like it's one of the few spots in the MCU that is specific to one place. Like the Ant-Man world, while Ant-Man and Wasp have crossed over and gone to other places, like those 3 characters, you don't see them go anywhere but this world. And it felt like a lost opportunity, and a spot where, from a narrative standpoint, which is where pretty much all of my issues lie with this movie, you could have made this feel even more like an Ant-Man movie if Luis is have Luis catch Scott up on the 5 years that he missed, right? Like, any number of things that you could do. That character is so versatile and so funny, and because Pena is so good at the quick talking, it could be a 2.5-3 minute stretch. Like, there was more than enough places where you could have gotten them in the front or back of the movie and just gave fans a little bit of, like, that's my Ant-Man stuff that I really love, where, again, I think a little bit of the gel that's missing could have been coming from those guys. And last but not least, when you're talking about, like, the things that struggle in this movie, and I already said it in what I was talking with the non-3-act structure, but Janet was driving me crazy. I think Michelle Pfeiffer does a wonderful job, and like I said, I really would have loved some Hank and Janet stuff in the movie that was more than just like talking to Bill Murray. It's the worst thing in the whole movie. Like, I almost have to put Janet in her own category, even though we've mentioned how she drags her feet talking about Kang. Everything that's connected to her story is frustrating and stuff that takes momentum out, right? Like, that Bill Murray sequence is cringe-inducing, and not in a good way for me. Like, that whole, I felt uncomfortable. Like, I felt like I was Hope at the table. Like, this is just awkward. It's not funny, but he's gonna be the guy that gets those 3 to Kang, right? And then that doesn't even happen. Trim that stuff out. Like, if there is fat in this movie, it is around Janet Van Dyne, and the fact that she can't tell people who Kang is. Like, you could have had her say that so early on in the movie, and then just got things like, there's just a lot of dragging of the feet with Janet's character, where it's just like, why are you not telling them? Okay, you haven't told them yet. Now this crazy shit just happened. Why are you still not telling them? And that was the thing for me the first time I watched the movie, where I was just like, bro. Like, I was literally looking at my watch sometimes. I look here, like, at my watch. I would check, I was checking my, like, every once in a while, I would just do, like, the quick, geez, man, we're, like, 45 minutes into this. We still haven't seen Kang. And those are the types of things that, I want to say, zap out. Those are the things that suck the momentum out of the movie, that are roadblocks for the momentum. And in a movie like this, if the momentum was in that upward swing and you hit your peak right in the end of the movie in the 3rd act, even some of the issues we talked about, I don't think impact the viewer in a way that makes it so negative. But when you're struggling to get your momentum constantly throughout the movie because the narrative is going to places that just don't gel well in the flow of the movie, like, I think Peyton Reed does the best with what they have. You wish maybe he could have adjusted a little bit more, but I really do think almost all 5 things that we talk about really extend from the narrative and the choices that Jeff Loveness makes. And while I don't think I'm concerned with Michael Waldron, I really loved what he did with Loki. I think it's some of the best writing, character and story-wise that we've gotten in the MCU, specifically in the Disney Plus TV realm. Loveness, you can just see all the issues with this movie stem from the narrative, in a way where, like, I'm concerned if he can really actually handle the Kang Dynasty stuff, because I think the thing he mishandles the most in the movie is Kang himself. And it's one of these where I kind of feel like Marvel juggling the amount of plates is juggling. Like, this movie could have used, I think I said this in my Fresh Out of the Theater review, but, like, it felt like it needed Feige to clean some of this stuff up, or be like, don't do that or don't do that, but let's move these things around. And that's what we're going to talk about next. The things that I would have moved or changed or tweaked that could have made this thing a top 10, because they're there. Like, the things are there, and if you piece together what I talked about on the good and what I've talked about on the bad, you could probably see some of the through lines of things that I'm going to talk about and what I would change. Because if you just shuffle where people are or certain elements of the story, this thing suddenly flows better, works better, and I think would have gotten you to moments where, like, when Ant-Man freaking is, like, pounding Kang into that building, like, the place should be going nuts. So while I do thoroughly enjoy this movie, and I'm, like, borderline loving it after my second viewing, there are issues in this movie that certainly don't help it, and certainly don't help it when you have people that are looking. I think there are people out there looking to start picking Marvel apart and trying to dismantle this superhero craze, because I think there are a lot of people in Hollywood and the industry that are just, like, tired of that's what, like, people go to the movies, they go see superhero movies. And I mean, that's not entirely true. They also watch Blue Cats, and people fly jets. But, I understand, and you don't want to give anybody any kind of ammo. And that's the brilliantness of Feige in the first 10 years of Marvel. There wasn't a whole lot they were fairly bulletproof, specifically once you got out of that first phase. And I just think narrative is what prevents issues from happening, and then you're dealing with, like, oh man, that CGI looked wonky, or oh, the action could have been better, or, like, little things where it's like, yeah, okay, I understand that, but, like, story-wise, that thing's rock solid. And that's the biggest problem with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, is that I think the story is there, but there are enough missteps where it's like, God, the narrative let this one down. So those are my 5 least favorite things about the movie, all of which pretty much tie into what I think are poor narrative choices. So while I don't want to see people lose jobs or see, like, immediate course corrections to be like, oh man, we gotta get these Rick and Morty writers out of here, I just think when you look at, like, I think Waldron, quality rise, really like what he did with Loki. He was okay with Multiverse of Madness, but, like, I don't see it with Loveness. And if there was one thing I would course correct on, I would think about letting Cretton pick his own writer for Kang Dynasty. I don't know. That's my big shaky, but that's all I got, man, on the things that I don't like. This is mostly narrative choices, and if you would have tweaked a few of them, this movie probably does better. But hey, I want to know what you don't like about this movie. I've seen plenty of hate on the critic side. I've seen a little bit less of it on the audience side, but there's plenty of hate out there, and plenty of people who don't like things about this movie. And I'm not playing into the hate. I don't like playing into the hate game. Hate is what's wrong with the world a lot of the time. But there are definitely things in this movie that don't work, that could have been better, that I don't really like. So I want to know, what are the things in this movie that didn't work or that you didn't like when you watched it? And is it something that if you went and saw it a second time, maybe you got a group of friends that were just like, come on, we're going to go see Quantumania, and you're like, I already saw it and I didn't really love it, but fine, I'll go again. Did it improve at all for you? Were those things that maybe were really in your face that first viewing less impactful the second time around? That's the one thing where, like I said in my Things I Liked video, I think this movie could age really well, because I think the more you come back to it, the better it gets, and the things that don't work become less deafening, so to speak. So anything that you guys got on the bad side of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and I guess the indifferent side. You can put it down below in the comments section. I look forward to talking to you guys down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new, you want to come hang out with the C-Man anytime we're talking movies, TV, trailer, reactions. Maybe you want to see what things I would have done differently to make Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania a freaking banger. Maybe you want to just see the other things that I got to say or talk about because you like how my brain works. Or maybe you're just digging my vibe. You want to show a little love and support. Well, hey, come join C-Maniac Nation. It's super easy. All you got to do, jump over there, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time for the C-Man's Cinema Sit Down, I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace. Oh, you guys are still here. You snuck up on me. You must be looking for more of this guy. Well, I got two video options for you, man. Right up here and right over here. And if you want all those C-Man goodies, well, hey, come join the squad right on over there, and I'll catch you on the next one.